What's up, chat? Welcome back to the stream. It's Wednesday. I was just being accosted by a cat. As soon as I started speaking, she got upset. But she was. Oh boy, was she upset? Here she is. You want to come hang out with chat? No, she wants to yell at me because I'm not playing with her laser pointer right now. It's Wednesday. The Warhamster has graced us with his presence, giving us some incredible stuff to talk about. So this week actually sent me on an insane rabbit hole, discussing all sorts of threads explicitly about the 1-inch wall screening rule, which for some reason has been a huge contentious point, a point of contention in the last couple of months, explicitly. So I was wondering what to talk about today. Realized that as I was going through a bunch of discussions, like all of them had to do with this rule. I was like, what happened most recently to make this be such a thing? Pretty wild. We can start off with a little bit lighter fare before we hop into that, but this has been a whole odyssey for me. So we get to go through the entire journey of talking about this rule, and we get to talk about whether or not we like it or all that stuff. You know, it is what it is. Let's hop in. And first of all, let's talk about something a little silly to begin with. And I feel like we've all been here. I saw this thread come up and I was like, not only have I been this person, but I played against this person. I absolutely understand. This has nothing to do with the main topic of the video, but I loved this thread so much that I thought it was worth discussing. Let's go. The opponent, according to Silent Lord Protector, opponent does not understand probability. Now, to be fair, I do want to call out the opponent they're talking about here is a youngin, a little baby boy, 18 to 20, somewhere in there. So probably can't even drink yet. And I will say, before we hop in too hard here, at this age, you've got, having been somebody who's played miniature games that age and been played against and seen a million of the people right around this age range play miniature games, the psychology is bizarre because you have a chip on your shoulder where you're like trying to prove yourself. So you want to appear very cocky and also like you're in control of whatever situation. So we can't judge them too harshly. People between the ages of, especially young guys between the ages of 18 and 20 are fucking idiots. Were we to talk about this person 5-6 years later, I don't think they would have the same experience. So we cannot judge the person that the OP is talking about here very harshly. Full story. I had a weird experience yesterday during a local FLGS 40K meetup. Would love to share some input from those with more competitive 40K experience. Full story. We'll meet the TLDR. We'll just skip the TLDR for now because we're going to do the long story. I got paired into a person I had not played with before. He bought Combined Arms Guards versus Gladius Black Templars. He says, I'm prepping for a tournament. Ask him, okay to play a competitive game. I said, sure thing. I have my first Rogue Trader tournament coming up at the end of the month. Definitely happy to. Opponent warns me, he's been to tournaments before. I've been to tournaments before, sir. You better watch out. So he won't go easy on me. Okay. Throughout the game, this young man showed no understanding of probability whatsoever. Some examples include, during the pre-game talk, I explained the Black Templar, Marshal, Castellan, Sword Brother in combo. All Mastercraft power attacks of lethal hits, hit on 2s, critical on 5s, reroll hits of plus wound strength is equal or lower than toughness value. His assessment, that's not that strong. My brother in Christ. In fairness to him, the lethal hits, reroll, 5-up critical combo doesn't feel like it's the craziest thing in the world until you see it in action. And you're actually like, wait a minute, 50% of your attacks are automatically wounds, and the rest of them probably wound on 4s. That's actually insane. It's actually, I mean, it's good, right? Like, Sword Brother and die like 2 stiff breeze and are expensive, but no one can contest that they don't have strong hitting power, especially against the non-armor of contempt targets. He decides to charge 3 Bulgren into a unit, deals 2 damage, gets obliterated. Shocking. A true shocking experience. I guess the Bulgren have damage reduction into a field of pain, right? So I guess it's I guess like you could be like, well, it's 2 damage. Yeah. It's 2 damage, and I like reduce all incoming damage. I basically like more than half incoming damage, right? So I reduce incoming damage by like 40 or by like 60% if it's against mass 2 damage. I think I'll live. No, you don't understand. It's so many wounds. It's too many wounds. You'll still die even if you're -1 damage. I also explained I have a Marshal Lieutenant Crusader combo. Lots of chainsword attacks with lethal sustain. D6 plus 2-inch surge move. Loves it. Decides to shoot another Bulgrin unit into his squad. I remind him that I'm 4 inches away and have a surge move. He says it won't matter, proceeds to shoot, kills 1 neophyte, gets surged into, wipes his unit. Oof. That is an oof move. He decides to walk a sentinel within 12 inches of a Black Templar Repulsor Executioner. I remind him my full rerolls to hit. Quote, the sentinel can take it, end quote, sentinel gets blown apart. I imagine by Overwatch. I imagine that this is an Overwatch attack. Well, if you move within 12, I automatically have a unit within 12. The Black Templar Repulsor Executioner, if we will be reminded, gets full hit rerolls against something with a friendly unit, including itself within 12 inches. So your Overwatch is absolutely disgusting with that guy. A lot of it, I think, depends on whether or not the laser hits. So, like, the Repulsor Executioner shoots 1,000,000 times, right? It's like whatever it is, 32 non-laser attacks. Unless he has the Plasma. I guess the Plasma is really good there. And I guess a 3-wound guard, Victrix Honor Guard. This is post Victrix Honor Guard. Maybe you do play Plasma cannons on the Repulsor Executioners. With the Plasma, it gets dicier because you have more chances to hit the big gunshot. With the laser, it's like we basically get 4 rolls to get a 6, and if you don't get any of those 4, which is over a 50% chance, right? It's like a 75% chance. Then like maybe we're okay. And even if you do hit the 4, you could fail or whatever, not kill it in one shot. The little guns probably won't kill a sentinel, but you're basically just banking on the big guns not hitting. And he just got, he hit he didn't get the 25% of the sentinel lives there. Did he learn from the 3 above? No, he decides to drive a damage limit rush commander in front of the executioner. With 5 wounds left, I can tank it. You can't, and I score assassination. Oh, on his turn with Overwatch? In fairness, I don't know. Just being like constantly making your opponent throw Overwatch and roll the executioner laser shots. I don't know. Feels like it is what it is sometimes. Bulgrin shooting, something that absolutely shouldn't be uttered. Yeah, I do wonder to some extent if these might actually be Ogrin. Ogrin shooting is good. Bulgrin basically shouldn't have guns. They can have a gun, right? But they replace their melee attack with the gun, so you just won't do it. Feels bad. But the Ogrin shooting is okay. Ogrins obviously are significantly worse at surviving than Bulgrin are. I can understand being like, my Bulgrin are hard to kill and everyone complains about them, so I think I will survive. Especially into a 2 damage, a unit with 2 damage weapons. Maybe I will be able to tag them for an additional turn, and then they die because like your opponent has 1,000,000 attacks. They're all really good. Ogrin shooting at something is good, but obviously getting surgery too. Not ideal. Things like this happen at least 3 to 4 times per turn. In every instance, I would point out what's going to happen and offer a takeback. Every time I got brushed off progressively more rudely. Every time he is surprised and repeats, better be lucky than good, I guess. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. I'm not that lucky. The rolls are average. Because of his progressive agitation, we played the last turn with the FLGS manager hovering nearby. It was his initiative, not a request from either player. At the end of the game, the opponent muttered a thanks and bolted out, leaving me to clean up. I talked it over. I understand that too. If you're tilted, then like you don't want to get out of the situation. Even if you're like, I guess I'm not cleaning up the train or whatever. It sucks, but I understand that. I talked over with the store manager. He feels I did what I could. Somehow, especially as a much older man with kids, I feel I've failed this guy. Any input from anyone who dealt with something similar would be appreciated, and we'll read some of the input. So first of all, I've absolutely been In some cases, right, it's a misunderstanding of the mechanics involved, right? You just don't know what your opponent's army does. And that is, in fairness, a skill at the game, right? Matchup knowledge is a skill. You should be able to know what your opponent's army is capable of. So you know that if I, charge the Bulgrin, even though the Bulgrin are -1 damage, if I charge them into the 2 damage weapon unit, they're probably going to kill me because they have a trillion attacks and they don't care that I'm high toughness. The toughness actually works against me. So like, I understand, right? And I've also been on the receiving end of being like, I'm pretty sure on average a lot of these things happen, and then my opponent gets like the 5 up, the 5% above average roll, and then kills me with that, and I've been like, oh my god, this sucks. But then looking back on it, I was like, why did I enter myself into these situations where it's there's only a little bit of variance in my opponent's favor gives him the opportunity to win. And I'm not saying that any of these are particularly like that, right? In some cases, it's like executioners, and we're rolling Overwatch and hoping we hit our laser shots. But I will say that definitely I've played games where at the end of the day, I've been like, I made a bunch of plays that I thought on average dice would be fine, but like we're not, because it turns out dice aren't average all the time. So I've definitely understood that, and I've definitely played against people. And in some, it's oftentimes a matchup knowledge thing. I've definitely played against people where they go, "Oh my god, I can't believe you killed this thing," and you're like, "Well, either I average dice, I kill you," so it's like it is what it is. Or on the other hand, it's like, well, if I swing up like 15 or 20%, I kill you, which will happen, whatever, 30% of the time or something. Like all I have to do is get a little bit above the bell curve, and then this thing happens. And so like your opponent comes into a situation expecting a particular outcome, and you're like, well, the dice said that wasn't going to happen this time. Obviously, there are situations where you could be like, oh my god, I didn't expect my opponent to roll 17 consecutive 4-up saves or whatever, and like absolutely take my entire round of shooting. There are some situations where you can't plan for it 40k, but your opponent making, like I've seen people like tilt out because you've made 3 out of 4 4-ups, right? And it's like, well, you hand me 4 dice and each one's a 50-50. There's like a very strongly significant chance that I make 3 out of 4 instead of 2 or 1 out of 4. And so hinging your whole game plan on me failing exactly like 2 out of 4 4-up invulnerable saves, I don't think was the greatest plan ever, right? That's like, you're just sending it to variance. And so this thread called out to me because I definitely have seen this a lot of times. In this particular instance, I think it's someone who didn't really understand the matchup and like exactly what Black Templars were going to do, especially if it's someone. And oftentimes this is the case for like younger players who are like just getting in. If you're like just getting in and you're consuming a lot of content and you're like, a lot of people say Black Templar's bad, so I should beat them. But realistically, it comes down to like player skill, right? And your ability to play around what your opponent has. And so if you think like, well, Astral Storm good, Black Templar's bad, I will beat the Black Templars, and then you lose because your opponent's better than you. That can be tough. That can be a tough pill to swallow. And so I think hopefully it's a learning experience here. He now knows what Sword Brethren do, which is good. And now he knows not to underestimate people playing factions that are mathematically worse than yours, because generally speaking, outside of some very specific matchups, like matchup admission combinations, the player who is better at 40k will generally win the 40k game. That happens more often than not. That's why you see consistent people who play consistently place at the top, sometimes just with the same faction, even if the faction's underpowered in the metagame. Yeah. Great stuff. Average is also 50%, meaning it will not happen every time. Yeah, that's such a good rule to drill into people's heads too, because they're like, well, average dice means that's what I should expect. No. Average dice means it happens like that or better happens 1/2 of the time. Exactly half of the other times it will go slightly worse for you, right? And so you want to be hedging your bets for X amount above average in order to be able to make correct plays. First comment here, 558 upvotes. Hot damn. You can't teach someone who doesn't want to learn. Especially, thanks to Lorik the Bear, especially if he rolled up saying he wanted to practice for a tournament. Yeah, especially assuming that the OP's like story is all the correct sequence of events here. He goes, I'm prepping for a tournament. I'm not gonna go easy on you. And then proceeds to like faceplant in every situation. The other thing too is like, I've been to tournaments before doesn't mean anything. That just literally means you've been to tournaments before. That's not being like, well, I'm on the national team for my country or something, right? I'm on the WTC team, or I qualified for world championships, or like something like that, right? You know, I'm like top of the conference, conference circuit that I'm in or whatever. Just having been to tournaments before doesn't necessarily mean that you are extremely good at 40K. Anyone can go to tournaments, right? That doesn't mean anything. I do like it when people say that. I was like, well, I play in RTTs. Okay. Me too. Cool, man. It's good that you had $15 and a day to spend playing the game. I hope you had a great time. But that's not like tournaments are open to everyone, right? It's not an invitational. Anyone can go do that. I love like seeing comments like that. It's like, whoa. You know, only the elite players can play tournaments. No, anybody. Literally anyone can play tournaments. I should win. Oh, yeah. So I have a motto, chat. This is my motto. And I try very hard because I've been burned by this a million times. You gonna come on? There she is. There's the key. We should get a cat tower to sit right here so that Inky can hang out. Right now she's just hanging out in the back of my chair. Get you on camera? There you are, kitty. There she is. Look at you. She's so fuzzy right now, by the way. She's a big fur ball. I've been burned by this a bunch of times, but my motto is for analyzing matchup is that as soon as you assume you're gonna win or take for granted a win, you're gonna lose. Almost every time. Where you're like, well, my opponent doesn't look like they're that good, and their list is bad and their faction's bad. So I don't, immediately you just like take the pressure off. You don't give your opponent any credit. You assume that they're going to like give you all these like free things that you don't have to work for. And immediately their win percentage skyrockets. As soon as you go to any matchup in any game, especially Warhammer, but any game realistically, and you assume from the get-go that you are going to win, regardless of the reason or the situation, the chance that you lose is massively, massively improved. So you always have to play games. You always have to assume that your opponent's also going to try to win the game, right? And especially for 40K, which is a game that has so many decision points in it, that if you are not considering all of them correctly, then you can make the wrong choice a bunch of times, and your opponent gets a huge advantage. Whereas your opponent is on, if they come in assuming that they are going to lose, but with good play they could win, they're going to overanalyze all those situations, and their decision making is going to be so much better than yours. So anytime you go into a thing, you're like, well, I'm playing against Imperial agents, free win. The Imperial Agents player is probably very highly enfranchised, experienced with Imperial Agents, and now you are not taking the game as seriously as they are, and suddenly you're going to lose. So 100%, you should never take a win for granted. That's a really, really easy way to have a terrible, terrible time. Some incredible responses here. First obvious flag is even Lehman Russ commander. Brutal. Fucking brutal, dude. No one should play Lehman Russ commanders. They suck. Also, he's shooting with Bulgrim because he doesn't have the clubs. I assume that those are Ogren. I assume they're Ogren. In fact, he's got 6 Bulgrim, but opted to run them in 2 teams of 3. Is the Sentinel the little chicken walker looking thing? If so, that thing is a joke. I charged one of the 2 Custodians and Terminators and annihilated. Yeah, that's easy peasy. The little ATST. Yeah. Interesting stuff. Taking out 2 RTT's agents? Yeah, for sure. Hell yeah, dude. Congrats. That's awesome. Black stuff, stealth mode activated. My all my furniture is black for the most part. Aurelius Albright over here, I think, echoing something that we talked about at the beginning. As an older man myself, it reminded you that we were both dumb young men at one point, likely similar in regards to something. He's just still there. Boy needed to learn. Sometimes the best teacher is failure. 100%. I think I remember so many instances where, you know, I was like 19 and being like, I'm good at, I'm the best gamer. I'm the most elite gamer there is. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, that was cringe. I was a fucking idiot. And even seeing like new players come into the game too at the same time, and they're just like, you know, they've consumed content and they got their TTS reps in, and they've you know, watched all the tier lists and stuff, and the same thing happens where they're like, I think I should win this matchup or whatever, and then they make mistakes and then things go poorly for them, and it's just part of the learning experience. Thing is, even if you are just lucky, that's literally how dice work. I had a game recently, I swear to God, my opponent could not roll anything under a 5. It was just his time to roll hot and my time not to. Yeah, sometimes it just happens. It's it is a little nice when sometimes you can chalk up poor performance to dice when you're like, concretely, you're like, I think I did everything I could here, but actually realistically, the dice just killed me. And that does happen. I've had games where I've won on dice, I've had games where I lost on dice. And in some cases, it's a nice thing about 40K where the variance adds a level of obfuscation to your decision making, where first of all, you don't know if any of your decisions are correct before you make them, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. But also, you don't have to hit yourself so hard about making poor decisions if you either get rewarded or punished by good or bad dice, because, you know, sometimes it softens the blow a little bit that you got blown out if your opponent also wrote incredible. And you're like, maybe there was a line of play to get out of that situation, but it was difficult to see. And also it was unlikely. And my opponent was rolling like a god. And so just don't worry about it. Just, you know, you lost the dice sometimes. It just happens. It's kind of nice. I was playing a casual game in London on Saturday against Eldar. I was playing Blueberries with Calgar Aggressor block. Ooh, aggressors! This is a man of culture right here. The Calgar Aggressor unit. It's been a while. He charged Banshees in with a 14-inch move, 3d6 charge because the mission condition... Oh, shit. We were playing like Bloodlust or whatever, the twist card. Yikes. Which proceeded to land a billion sustained hits. I rolled literally nothing but 1s and 2s. The Apothecary, 6 aggressors, 2 Victrix, leaving Calgar hanging on like a kid's backpack strapped after an impromptu game of lunchtime rugby. That was with Arbor of Contempt. Incredible. That's very good. Man, the Flamestorm Aggressor Squad. What an OG. What did he kill off the Victrix? Great question. Who knows? Maybe he didn't know the combo. Oh, somebody else brought that up. After your aggressors die, you're allowed to put wounds on Calgar. See, my opponent told me you couldn't. Brutal. Absolutely disgusting. Somebody come into this thread and link my video on this guy. Link my video on my name is Calgar. That's very good. So I liked that thread, chats. I thought that was a great thread. I think it's every once in a while, especially for the people who tend to get salty about dice, where you're like, oh man, I can't believe you killed that thing with all your shooting, and then you think about it and you're like, actually, it was like probably like a 49%er that he killed me, and I was expecting a 50% conversion, and that's not, you know, that's not like very reliable. And so, like, you know, go back and take a look at how you approach those situations. All right, chat. One more funny thread, and then we get into the heart of things. This one was a little bit difficult for me to parse, but here we are. Why do I have an ad for Jesus? I don't want to see that. Unable Psychology 671. This house rules like ruin. How do you deal with house rules in local RTTs? House rules like ruins aren't passable no matter the height. Works as is for fly keyword, but cannot be crossed except by infantry and beasts. So you can't go. So the Primarch Belisarius call. This is in the last month, by the way. Their local RTT ruled that Primarchs couldn't go through walls. This is what I'm reading here. And like Belisarius call can't go through walls. And I guess super heavy walkers maybe, but that's like an ability. I don't know. That's different. And I guess also that you cannot parkour them. So you can't like use long movement to climb over walls, even for a non-infantry beast. Pretty wild. How about swapping models during rounds? Like moving one unit and then deciding mid-round that the intention was to move a different unit, so you could pick up one and swap the other with completely different loadouts in multiple times with multiple rounds, with no regard for how they could have moved. Okay. Oh, you're just asking for takebacks. Those are just takebacks. This feels like someone who is relatively new to competitive 40k, and somebody was just like taking a bunch of takebacks when you were like, you didn't, you're like, what? And they were like, no, it's fine. That's the rule. We can do that here. You can just take a takeback. But you have to ask usually. With no regard for how they could have moved to the move phase. Oh, so I guess also it would be like, I meant to put my las cannon guys on this flank and not my bolter guys, so I'm just gonna switch the team. Definitely can't do that. That's a little. You'd be like, hold up. You deployed those bottles. That's on you, buddy. And then scoring primary at the end of turns instead of the command phase. How do you deal with that? Chat, this is called you're not playing 40k. You're playing a different game. Somehow you ended up at a Star Wars Legion tournament, and we are not playing 40k anymore. I just wouldn't play in them. Says Squirrel Man. Those aren't house rules. That's just straight up cheating. Pretty much all of these are simply not things. All tournament play is rules, plays by the rules as they are. The only specific things for tournaments is how to treat physical terrain features, i.e. whether windows are open and closed. Sometimes portions of wall that are 2 inches, 2.5 inches are deemed to be less than 2, so you can move through them with stuff. If you input a list before the event, that is your list. See, we got -8. Holy shit. The OP got downvoted. Unable psychology. Wait. This the plot thickens. OP got fucking nuked by the comment section. He got absolutely ratioed by Moldar the Great. This occurred at a local RTT, which is no reflection of the community at large. Why I reached out to see if anyone else has similar experiences, or if this is more of an odd duck kind of thing. Why did he get downvoted for that? He said, hey, my local community doesn't play with that, but this one tournament I went to does, and everyone went, fuck you. That's classic Reddit. Oh, it was edited. I guess maybe he said something different, and then maybe he edited it. I guess. Okay. I don't know every RTT in the world. I'm sure some are run by crazy people. None of this is accepted by the broader competitive community. Yeah, there is like every once in a while you do hit an RTT that's just like super weird because like a store owner or a TO or something has like very strong opinions about the game. That's why you should always be wary of events that don't have a player pack. That's the thing too. It's like sometimes you show up and they're like, today we're gonna be playing, but battle ready only works if you've converted every model in your army. If you're not converted, then you don't get it. And also, Eldar play with 1,800 points instead of 2,000. And you're like, wait, what? Excuse me? Or they're like, we're playing the 9th edition core rulebook missions this weekend. Excuse me? No, we're not. It used to be really bad in like 8th edition. 8th edition, I saw crazy ones because there wasn't really competitive standardization like there is now. 8th edition was wild because a lot of times for large GTs and things, individual events had their own mission pack that they designed and balanced their own missions. So you had like 4, at least in my area, there were like 3 or 4 different mission packs that were being played, and there was a lot of overlap. Like some of them took missions from each other, or took missions from the core book, or whatever. But in some cases, they were just had like crazy unique rules. And then you would show up to an RTT, and you would be like, "Are we going to play ITC, which is the event, which is like the mission format used by literally 90% of every tournament ever?" And they were like, "No, we're playing like Du Bois packet or whatever." And you're like, "What the fuck is that?" I've never read any of these missions. That was always super tough. I would not participate in any event that deviated from the rules beyond clarifications for their terrain, whether or not they were following the WTC FAQ. I've had some issues with 10th rules writing, but there's basically no chance any random TO at an LGS is going to make things better with custom fixes. Yeah. I think generally speaking, you're always going to make somebody mad. You might as well just play by the rules as written and call it a day. It was a standard from 5th until 8th, until ITC missions. Well, even post ITC missions, because I basically only played through 8th edition. Under the umbrella of ITC missions, but you would still have like 20% of tournaments, I would say, who would be like, no, we're doing our own thing. Like RTT specifically. Larger events were like wild. Like Adepticon had its own rules pack. Nova had its own rules pack. Du Bois GT had its own rules pack. That was like local in my area, so that was a lot of people used that one randomly. And then obviously ITC, and then WTC had its own thing. So it was like fucking all over the place, and you never knew what you were playing. It was crazy. It's insane, bro. But then you would like in terms of small one-day events, 99% or 80% of people would be like, I'm just gonna use the ITC packet because it's easy. But then you'd have these like little individual tournaments who'd be like, no, I made my own missions, or I'm playing the rulebook missions. The worst was when you would show up and they would be like, yeah, today we're gonna do random rulebook missions from the core rulebook, and you're like, no, don't do that. This is 8th edition. Those rules are dog shit. They are the worst. The worst was I rocked up in my first tournament ever. There's a battle report on the channel about it. I cheated really badly because I didn't know the rules. But nobody caught me apparently, which is wild. I rocked up in the finals game. They played a mission where within 18 inches of the center of the battlefield, where all the objectives were, you couldn't take invulnerable saves. You just lost your invulnerable save if you had one. So everything had to could revert to armor saves. And I was like, I was looking at my armor, I was playing 60 Gene Stealer Tyranids. I was like, oh no, my Gene Stealers, they will not have their 5+ invulnerable save. And then I looked at my opponent's army, and it was all Thunderwolf cavalry with storm shields. So he had paid points, swapped a weapon on his units to get a 3+ invulnerable save that he couldn't use. And I was like, dude, I'm sorry, man. I have no idea how you win. And he's like, guess I die. I was like, it was disgusting. It was so brutal. And that was the last time I played at actually, that wasn't the last time I played at an event that decided to use mission rulebooks rules, but the core mission rules. But that was like the example of how bad it could get playing non-standardized missions from early editions. Holy fucking shit. Absolutely terrible. Just ruined. It like ruins the experience, honestly. I was just like, I guess handed this win by the mission. Here you go. You get to win the game because your opponent's army doesn't have any saves. Sick. I love that. That's fun for me.
Adriong 6931 donated $2 through Super Chat. So Owens just exploded.
Yeah, Zone Throwers would fall back on their 5-up. Or they have 6-up or something? I don't remember. My whole army was like 5+ armor. But it didn't really matter that much because it was like you get shot by most stuff and you're like, I'm assuming these guys are gonna die anyway. I mean, back in 8th edition, everyone had 1 wound. So you're just scooping models up regardless. It was like, oh no, I'm like 17% easier to kill. This is terrible. But my opponent went from a 3+ armor to fighting rending Gene Stealers, which were AP4 on criticals. On a 3+ invulnerable save too, basically having no save at all. So he lost 66% of his survivability. Just took 3 times as much damage as he should have. Fucking brutal. Absolutely insane. Yeah, not a good time. It was not a good time. Zone Thrips were, I don't think Zone Thrips were like functional at all in that edition. They just like cast a spell. They were so bad in 8th edition. So that didn't really bother. And like you lost the save on like Hive Tyrants, which was annoying, but I just don't think I put my Hive Tyrant in 18 inches of the middle until the late game. So that was a funny thing, chat. That was a funny thread about that thread. Let's move on. Just give Magnus to 3++. He used to just have he used to be -1 to hit and have a 3++. I guess he has -1 damage now, so that's like something. All right. So let's move on to this Odyssey about 1-inch wall screening. So first of all, actually, let's talk about what 1-inch wall screening is. So, basically, so the main thrust of this, and there's a bunch of people talking about it right now online. The main thrust of the discussion is this idea that because a model can't end a movement intersecting a terrain feature, right? If you can't end your movement without overlapping a wall, a vertical element of terrain, you can't stand there. There's a wall there. Makes sense. So because you're physically impeded by a wall and your engagement range only ever extends 1 inch, you end up with this situation where if your opponent stands 1 and a little bit inches away from the front edge of the wall, there's no physical way that you can engage them through the wall. So, I actually wonder if it's beneficial to like do this on TTS. Do I have that set up actually? I do. I bet we could do it real quick. Let's do it real quick. And we can talk about some of the weird situations that occasionally come up when you are talking about doing this stuff. If my client would load. Maybe it doesn't load, and then we don't have to do any of that stuff. Here we go. So essentially you can occupy the space in front of yourself with the wall of the ruin to prevent enemies from getting into engagement range of you. It's a very controversial effect. Now, to be fair, some people call it a rule. It's not a rule. It's just like a use of the game mechanics in such a way that you can protect yourself from charges. Okay, so let's build a little lobby here and grab a list. Oop, one sec, chat. We're just loading. Cool. So, for example, here we are. For example, we want to protect ourselves. Here we have a scout squad. We say, I would like my scout squad to stay inside this building. These buildings this is layout 3. The layout 3 buildings right here are like a great example. They say, I would like to protect my scouts inside this building and not get them attacked. So if I put them inside the building in such a way where in TTS we can make an engagement range, it's really easy to do. In IRL play, you have to basically play by intent sometimes, but you basically do this. So you construct a situation where you can see the edge of my engagement range. You just make it so it doesn't poke out through the wall. So my engagement range terminates inside the building. Now, no one can physically engage this unit unless they can enter the building or come around the side, right? So let's say we have our big Catan charts. Here's the Deceiver. Deceiver wants to punch the scouts to death, and the Deceiver comes over. Deceiver's engagement range is also fucked, I guess. Deceiver comes over and he says, I can't go through this wall. This sucks. His engagement range would end here. So if he attempts to charge the scouts while he's here, in order to make that charge successful, he would have to go all the way around here. It should be like a 10-inch charge to get all the way around. Even though the scouts are right next to him, he can't go in there, right? Similarly, if you have like an assault squad, so let's like talk about these guys, for example. These guys want to engage the scouts. They would need to either go around or they would need to find a position in here where they can fit their base. 32 mil bases are pretty easy to screen out like this, but once you get 25 mil bases, they can actually usually fit inside. So that's something that you'll oftentimes see people like clarify with their opponent. They're just like, if in case you want a wall screen, I have 25 mil attackers, so like sometimes they can just get in there. So like Harlequins and a lot of Eldar units and stuff like that can be relatively difficult to screen out, but it ends up depending quite a bit on like whether or not this works, right? Depends quite a bit on how big the wall is, because if you have a big thick wall, it's much easier to wall screen and prevent enemies from coming in. Because if we assume that this wall came out to like here, for example, right? Then suddenly the area where our we can the proximity to the wall we can stand while not projecting our engagement range through is much closer. So it's tougher to get units inside that gap right there, right in here. And it depends on the base of both the defending unit, because sometimes you can create these little concaves where stuff can, if we, for example, we did this instead of that, then suddenly there's room for an intercessor to go stand in there. So it depends on a ton of variables, right? Whether or not this geometry works. It depends on the base sizes of the two units. It depends on the size of the wall. It depends on how far this unit has to go. But 99% of the time, you can construct a situation where you create a solid wall of models without space for another group of models to stand inside there, and you prevent them from charging into the room. All right, that's basically the gist of the effect. And again, it's not a rule that's codified in the rulebook, right? It's just a utilization of the mechanics that already exist. So you're just using the engagement rules plus the vertical terrain rules together. Chlamydicus, thank you for the super chat.
Chlamydicus donated $10 through super chat. Hey Trevi, moving over to DA and I wanted to run a Storm Raven. How does moving this thing around in hover work for moving? Like if the wing passes over terrain but it's tall enough to not hit it.
Yeah, Storm Ravens are a fucking nightmare, dude. So as soon as you enter hover mode, basically assume it works like a repulsor. It's like a big repulsor. So it becomes a hull measurer, which means the measurement surface of the model is the whole fucking thing. So you can't move any part of it through terrain features, right? Unless it's 2-inch or whatever. So, like, for example, if you had a big tall wall and your Storm Raven wing would hit it, you can't go there. You have to go around, or you have to through the air over because you fly. However, if the terrain is short and you can put the wing over it, then you're good. The thing to keep in mind, however, is that unlike walkers and stuff and actual aircraft, as soon as you're not in hover, or as soon as you're in hover mode, you lose the aircraft keyword. So any benefit you would get from being an aircraft, immediately gone. So as soon as you move to hover mode and you begin to work like a hull measurement vehicle, if you extend your wing over a ruin wall, for example, such that it crosses it vertically crosses the area of the base, the footprint of the terrain, you are considered within that terrain, so people can see you. So not only is it very difficult to maneuver around tall walls, but also it's very difficult to hide because it's so big that oftentimes it will either peek over terrain or it would have to go to enter terrain with part of its extremities in order to be positioned. So you can extend over stuff that you wouldn't contact, but you have to, you take with that all of the downsides of potentially being inside terrain, for example. Yeah. Also, like, keep track too, because sometimes there's house rules for aircraft just because they're so fucking weird. We even have a house rule. I hate house rolling stuff, but we do have a house rule in events that I run on the server that if you hover mode an aircraft, you still use base measurement for measuring like lines to and from it, because otherwise you would have to measure the diagonal between the model you're measuring from and the wing of the Storm Raven, for example, which on Tabletop Simulator is possible, but fucking sucks. It's just like it immediately adds like 13 minutes to the playtime. It's fucking brutal. So just measure the hull, because otherwise it's stupid. So if you need to like disembark shit, you don't have to worry about how tall your wing is or exactly where the wing's positioned. You just use the base. That's not technically the rule. So if you're playing IRL, you're going to play it slightly differently, but it saves so much time and headache when playing the game virtually that that's a good way to do it. And sometimes they do similar rules for aircraft in player packets and stuff. So make sure you read through all those if you're going to play a tournament or whatever. Yeah, pretty wild. Sean Payton, new to 40K. Is it due to the fact it's a solid wall? It's because, well, yeah, I mean, I guess so. You can, if the wall had like a gap in it that you could physically move models into, that could change things. That's very rare where there's like a doorway where models can be placed. It's anywhere that the model's base can be physically restricted by the terrain feature. If you play in tournaments enough, you'll notice that like basically every single terrain feature ever is just a big solid wall. So you don't get doors and stuff that often. As much as I think doors would be very good. All right, chat. So we have talked about exactly what the wall screening rule is. That's the thing. Let's talk about where I began this great odyssey to discuss it. Two Copper Jack has a story to tell. This is from 7 months ago, so quite a while. Hey, y'all, he says, I'm generally not a competitive player, but I decided to play in a local tournament a while ago. And on the first turn of the game, I had an experience that threw me off for the whole day. That fucking sucks. And sometimes you have this, like, have you ever had, I played at RTT a couple weeks ago, and the first person I played with, I like put a scout squad inside of a building behind the wall, right? It was a big solid building. I think it used Frontline Gaming, like their MDF terrain, big solid building. And I put the scout squad in, and my opponent goes, oh, I can see those guys. And I was like, how? And he's like, well, they're in the ruin. And I was like, but there's a wall here. And he's like, well, as soon as you're in the ruin, you can see. Nope, that's not how that works. And it's always really awkward when you're just like, the first thing that happens in any game is you like shatter someone's conception of the rules. And they're just like, but every game I've ever played, we've said that if you're inside the terrain feature, you can see and be seen. No. You revert to true line of sight as soon as you're inside the terrain feature. So if there's a big fucking wall in your way, you still can't see because you can't shoot through the wall. And that always gets really weird. It's good, I guess, to learn, but it's like always awkward that you have to learn in like in competitive setting. Also, you should watch my videos, then you know. Hopefully they will in the future. All right. So, experience it threw him off for the whole day. Can somebody explain what I did wrong and what to do in the future? The local shop has an expansive terrain collection that doesn't align well with modern all-ruin layouts. So it uses acetate footprints to indicate where the terrain features are, using layouts from the mission pack. Good. Then puts down assorted 3D terrain to approximate imprecisely the rules prescribed. Less good. But as soon as you put the pig template down and you're like, there's supposed to be a building here, and then you put like 7 battlefield in a box, like pine trees on it, you're like, oh boy, this is gonna get tough. Uh-oh. Where can I move again? How does this work? Please, for the love of God, GW, write terrain rules that aren't just ruins. Holy shit. 11th edition, please, sir. Give me an area terrain forest I can put my shit in so I can use the trees that I own. Okay, so I set up Primaris Crusaders in front of my deployment zone to use a scout move to go into a ruin. Love it. Opponents infiltrated his commandos into the middle of the board in front of that ruin. Very good. He rolled to go first, so I scouted the Primaris Crusader squad up into the ruin. I stated that my intent is to set up just over an inch behind the wall so as not to be charged. The exact situation we just talked about before. I want my scouts to not be engaged in a ruin, so I'm going to place them so that there is less than 32 millimeters between the concave of their bases and the wall, so you can't engage them from the outside of the wall because I'm not close enough, and you can't engage them from the inside of the wall because you have to go all the way around. I was given to understand, quite rightly, that this is a standard tactic and non-controversial. Indeed, that's true. He agreed. Only use GW approved trees. No, I don't want to. The terrible fucking battlefield trees. Those are really cool. I have a set of them I use for Prestream events. And they're actually very cool if you don't put the little leaves on them. They look great with the little leaves on them, but they immediately shatter. They're the least robust miniature I've ever put together. It's crazy. So I have like a box with just nothing but a bunch of leaves from old trees I used to have, which I probably still have because they all shattered off. But if you just don't glue the leaves on and you like assemble them like they're a I guess for context, let's look at let's look at the kit we're talking about. If you assemble them without the leaves on them, then they're actually sweet. Can I find a picture that's not the size of a ant? Oh my god. Here we go. Here's somebody. It's on eBay. So it's these trees, and they come with little signs and stuff, so you can make it look like there's a minefield or something. It's kind of fun. And it's like a GW kit. It's an OG GW kit, so there's like a lot of customization. You can choose what your branches look like and like little accoutrements to put on them and all that stuff. It's cute. It's cute. It's a key terrain feature. The downside is that these little leaves, they just catch on everything and they immediately snag off. They're all like one point of contact for this big wide thing, and so they'll break off immediately. So the key is to assemble them like they're dead, like this guy did. Here we go. This guy did it, and then they look great, and they're also very robust, and they're hard plastic, and I like them a lot. They're great, but otherwise they're horrible. Absolutely a nightmare. All right. All right. I told him so he agreed. He agreed to the 1-inch wall thing. Fucking wild, first of all. Then commandos move up pretty close to the movement phase and declare a charge on the Crusader squad in the charge phase. I told him he needed 9+ to get some guys around the wall, and he said he thought he could just charge through the wall. I tried to explain the 1.x inch tactics, so like 1.01 inches or whatever, over 1 inches away from the edge of the wall. But I admit I may have done a poor job, as I'm not used to competitive play, and also I'm deaf. Fair enough. You know what? It's not on you to explain the regular rules of the game that you're using. He asked if a TO could clarify, and that was fine with me. Then, not one but 2 judges told me the tactic I was trying didn't exist. Just not even there. Okay. One judge told me engagement range was 1 inch. So I said, I'm over 1 inch away. That's outside engagement range, sir. I don't know if you've noticed, but 1 1/10 inch is bigger than an inch, so he's not in engagement range. He told me I couldn't measure such a precise distance. Fucking insane. The people who say this kind of stuff blow my goddamn mind. I think we very beginning of this series, I think we had a discussion like this, right? Where someone said, like, you can't measure within 1/4 of an inch or something. Like, you can't measure to the precision of 1/4 of an inch, so you always round it. And every response was like, that's a regular tape measure goes down to 1/10 of inches. What are you talking about? That's 2.5 times more precise than what you're talking about. And if we use laser cut precision measurement tools, we can get even more precise than that. What are you telling me? I can't measure a proxy base plus a 1 inch distance. It's so easy. It's like the easiest thing in the world to measure. All it requires is that you just you pop the proxy base down, you nudge your dudes under a little bit so they can't go, and then you just make sure you're not an inch away from the edge of the wall. I told him imprecision is why people declare intent and ask for agreement. Yeah. It's a clearly achievable game state. The question is whether either player wants to spend the entire time to exactly measure it so it's perfect. I don't know. Probably not. The other judge told me that since our real terrain was just for looks and the acetate footprints were measurement, the plastic between the minis was virtual, and he could charge right through. This is a wild thing to say also. Why did you put it there? So I guess the idea being that, like, we're gonna... I guess maybe that there's no 3D elements at all. If like we... Basically, like, if we can't use the terrain as it's described on the layout diagram, then we just won't use any terrain. We'll use only the footprint, and everything else doesn't matter. I asked if, in that case, I could shoot through the walls, and he said no. So what does that even mean? They weren't really virtual. So the first 4 opaque convention applied. Unhinged. So he say we've decided that because our terrain isn't like perfectly aligned to the layouts, that you can move through it freely, but you can't draw line of sight through it. So in some cases it's there, in some cases it's not. I guess I have 3 questions. Do I have an egregious misunderstanding of the tactic? Is it not standard? Number 2, if my tactic works, did I do an insufficient job of pleading it? Is there a concise way of getting my point across? Number 3, regardless of whether or not this tactic is controversial or not, if the TO rules it, I have to deal. I agree with that. In fairness, at the end of the day, if the TO says something, if they want to be played at their event, that's how it works. As soon as we like as a community don't abide by TO rulings, then the entire like game falls apart, right? Then anyone can do anything. So even if the TO is wrong, and sometimes they are wrong, And usually they'll correct themselves, and sometimes they'll go back and redress game states if they are incorrect about something. But if they do rule something on the day and there's nothing you can say to change their mind, then sometimes that's just how it is. Which it is what it is. That's how I imagine. I'm not a sports person, but I imagine that's how it is in most sports, right? If the referee says something on the field, even if it's not quite correct, you have to abide by it. Otherwise, the entire game slows to crawl and everything sucks. All right. There was a couple of clarifications that people had brought up. The tournament was in the US. There's no dimension of WTC rules in the tournament packet. So importantly, some people said, so WTC has a house rule around using walls in this way that extends your engagement range if you touch the wall. There's literally, I think, like 17 pages of rules about exactly how that works, because it's a whole weird thing, but they weren't using that rule. The layout was on Pariah Nexus layout too, which is outdated, but I guess this is 7 months ago, so this might have been Pariah Nexus. I don't think the TOs were bad, but I don't understand their methodology. Opponent was cool, not acting in bad faith. He was mostly a casual player, like me, with less YouTube in his browser. I guess like he didn't watch content is the idea. Well, that means we immediately mistrustful. Don't watch TacticalTortoise? I don't know, man. I don't know if I can get behind that. I play Bank Templars. I'm almost on the bad side of this tactic, so I don't particularly love it either, but it feels bad to spend 4 years being denied charges thanks to the tactic, only to have it pulled out from under me when I finally try it myself. I mostly just need to know if I should be telling my opponents they can't do it either. Yeah. So immediately, wild. A lot of people were like, well, you're clearly using the WTC house rules. That's not the case. They weren't. He did clarify that later on. H8 here says, you were right. This is a common tactic that's used all the time. Both judges were wrong. Brutal. Except if enemy models are 28 millimeter, they fit in the gaps. Commandos are 32 millimeter, though. And it depends on exactly how big the wall is and where the wall is, obviously, as we talked about before. It depends on a bunch of different criterias. Your TOs are bad, says Coffeeman220. Jesus. The terrain, the 1 inch from the wall charge denial approach is common interpretation of the rules. However, there are some 40k turn rules that allow you to fight through the wall. Some view the 1 inch as a cheese tactic.
$10
thank you for
super
the follow.
chat. Shout out to my buddy Blog for letting me know about the Wednesday stream.
Let's go, Blarg Zombie! What a Chad. We love we love a good Blarg Zombie here. Thanks for coming and hanging out. Appreciate you, bud. Yeah, we stream usually, unless I'm traveling for tournaments, we stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday over here. And we also stream on Twitch most weekdays and always on Sunday. Usually gameplay and sometimes card games and stuff if we don't have gameplay, but usually it's gameplay. Ryan, thank you for the super chat also.
Ebriong 6931 donated $5 through super chat. Auspex Tactics is obviously corrupting the minds of younglings with his British droning. Also something about frogs.
Something about the TTS complaining about Auspex Tactics is very funny. No, we love Auspex Tactics here. Auspex Tactics is a good way for information to be distributed to the community, which is something I'm in favor of. So we love Auspex Tactics. There's a discussion about whether it's cheese. Yeah. There are some 40k tournament rules that allow you to fight through the wall if you can't fit a model. Some view the 1 inch wall as approach as a cheese tactic. Unless stated in the tournament packet, you played as rules as written, and the most common approach within the US. The Waylander 0719 has a much different interpretation, though. He says the 1 inch wall is a cheese tactic. Let's not pretend that making it unchargeable from a direction, but being able to charge out in that direction isn't cheese. There is a discussion here because there is a entry in the FAQ for the tournament packet that does basically clarify that the interaction works according to the rules as written, but opens up a door for house rules to be implemented if a tournament organizer feels that it is too uninteractive. Personally, I think it's fine, but we can talk about exactly how we feel about it after we talk about some additional threads. So we already are getting a peek at some of the controversy behind this rule. And what I've noticed is that since this thread, there have been a huge number of threads that are discussing this. and which I will grab here. And I don't know if there was anything in particular that sort of instigated this, but because this has been basically how the rules have worked since 9th edition. In 8th edition, you could actually just phase through the wall. 8th edition allowed you to end your movement inside of terrain features. So you would just like pretend your model was there. It was a fucking mess. It was so bad. 9th edition said concretely, your base cannot go into a building. You can't go through a wall with your base. Which means that you can do the wall screening thing. It's a whole thing. All right. 6 months ago, Tampa Cross said, setting up just past 1 inch of a wall. I've been playing a lot lately, not understanding how the rule works. So he's just asking for clarification. If you are more than 1 inch from a ruined wall, if I charge you with a model, who cares as long as I can fit your base? That is correct. If you can fit a base, does this even matter? The answer is no. It doesn't matter if your base can fit. So the goal is, the onus is on the defending player to space themselves correctly to get to the point that you can't fit your base. And if you have proxy bases, it's really easy. Is it more about not being able to get into engagement range due to the thickness of the wall? I've yet to hear a stellar explanation. These are good questions because they basically highlight the entire issue. It's essentially the fact that he's essentially basically just like hit the nail on the head in both questions. All we have to do is say, yes, you're correct. But there's a whole discussion about it. Auspex Tactics expansion. Let's go. We got another one. And we're 2 for 2 on Auspex Tactics expansions. If you put a 28.5 millimeter base, it won't fit in a gap. Same applies with larger models like Terminators. You can position 39 millimeters from a wall with no 40 millimeter models getting in. However, often forgotten, you can go around the wall or over it, as engagement range is 5 inches vertically. This is a really important thing to consider as well. If you are playing on a terrain feature, which has become rarer and rarer, which is probably fine in my opinion, but it's become rarer and rarer to put multi-level terrain in your terrain sets. However, if your terrain is basically like not larger than like 5.2 inches tall, what you can sometimes do is go to the edge of the wall, then declare your charge and parkour up the wall as long as you're infantry, and then go into the building to engage down vertically. So if you have a multi-level terrain feature, the 1 inch wall screen thing can work against you. Although usually it doesn't, because that almost always requires a similar length of charge as going around the wall, right? It's like at minimum, if you're going up a 5 inch wall and then over, minimum like 6 or 7 inches. So it can help you a little bit in the cases where you're using particular terrain like that. Part of the weirdness about this whole thing is that we have to add so many caveats in because 40K doesn't have a standardized terrain set, right? And so a lot of it depends on like, well, where did you buy your ruin from? Is it from Frontline Gaming, or is it a Games Workshop one, or is it from somewhere else? Because where you purchased it, or did you make it yourself? That can all change how you interact with the building, which, in my opinion, not the best thing ever for competitive play. But it is what it is. Just how it ends up tending to be. There's a discussion about this this whole thing when going over a wall. If there is an overhang on the other side, do you have to go all the way up the wall and then down the overhang? All the way up the wall and then down to the overhang. I don't really know if I understand what's happening. What the discussion's about. There is some discussion too about flip belts, and I think Reaver, their little grapnel launchers, that I think that they assist themselves in this as well, because they can, when they make a charge move, they can ignore vertical distance. So if you're wall screening underneath a second floor, and the first floor is engageable from the second floor, a Reaver can charge you on like a 3. It doesn't matter. You can't protect yourself from the Reaver unless you also wall screen the second floor. And then usually that means you're in line of sight. So the whole point's moot because a Space Marine army is going to kill you. But like Reavers and anything that ignores vertical movement distance can usually just hit you immediately. So this whole effect doesn't have that much of a value against those specific units, which in fairness are extremely rare. It's like 2 or 3 in the whole game. Not enormous, not an enormous deal. So that's one thread that we had a discussion about it, which I think is very interesting because we get this whole talk about the second floor thing. There was then another thread talking that it needed a clear ruling. I'm tired with arguing. Tired of arguing with people. Excuse me. I can't read apparently. About what bases can and cannot fit between the almost imaginary play by intent 1.1 inch from a wall interaction. Either Games Workshop needs to rule anything 1 or 2 inches of wall can be targeted with wall fighting from models against the wall from the other side, or nothing can wall fight if models are 1 inch away from the wall and no models can fit that 1 inch gap beside, regardless of base size and wall thickness. It's annoying to read about bad faith actors straight up lying or getting this interaction objectively wrong in person by starting arguments. It's even more annoying when people use it online, when people online are discussing it, since people are left up to guess if the wall is thick enough to deny it, or people pulling up diagrams to dispute the interaction when people are asking for help or to clarify it, which is honestly ridiculous. It's nonsense, messy, sometimes bad faith. We need clear rules to clarification on this interaction. Now, to add, I don't hate the interaction, personally speaking. From 1.1 inch from the wall keeps the game super dynamic. Actually, gives melee armies some good fineness when playing, forcing enemies to be mindful of positioning and throwing ranges. However, the interaction is sometimes used as a shield to protect bad positioning on the defending player side, or bad faith nonsense, like what happened in a recent person on the subreddit discussing that a bad faith Drukhari player. I don't know if I saw that thread. Somebody linked that to me. Jesus, what? I personally have never thought to push back when someone goes, oh, that was supposed to be 1.1 from the wall, so I thought it was safe. Okay, pal, I'm not here to argue. Just don't want there to be arguments over this either, and this is a grain zone of rules interruption from the community that needs clarity. So here's my thought about this, chat. And this might be controversial. I actually don't think it needs a clear ruling. Because you basically... I guess like it doesn't need the current way the rules, the interaction works is essentially inherently immune from having a concrete, comprehensive rule applied to it. What it needs, if you really wanted to clean up the situation, not have any of this stuff happen, is a rewrite about how ruins are re-engaged or are engaged in melee. However, in order to do that, you would need to go back and basically rewrite all of the terrain rules. So it's basically like it's an 11th edition thing. We're gonna kick that can down the road. The way the reason it works how it does right now is because it's not an actual rule, right? As we talked about before, this is not a real mechanic. With this, we call it wall screening, or we call it 1.1 inch, or we call it like defending walls or something like that, right? A lot of times you'll have different colloquialisms for it, but it's not a mechanic in the game. There's no section in the core rules that says this is how to defend a ruin from enemy charging you. It is simply the use of mechanics that already exist to protect yourself. And I understand that it does get to weird situations where you can have actors that act in bad faith. What I think is maybe what we need to do is in the absence of a rules rewrite that changes how this interaction works, is maybe we need to reconsider the depth at which we play by intent when it comes to this particular interaction, right? So here's a weird thing that happens. Playing by intent is like a very much like a 40K-ism for the most part, right? I would say most miniature games and most true measurement games do it to some extent, where you're like, oh, I meant to like do this, and I bumped the model, or the table got shook, or whatever. And we all know that model is supposed to be base to base with that model to do a thing, but they're like 2 millimeters apart. Of course, they're supposed to be next to each other. Part of the problem with 40K is that it's so dense, right? There's so much going on. There's so many individual movements and individual miniatures and mechanics involved at one time that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to keep that all concrete at one time. So we play by intent, so we don't necessarily have to have everything be millimeter perfect precision. In this one instance, maybe it's time to say maybe we should have millimeter perfect precision in the case of this one particular interaction. Or we should enforce more highly demonstrated intentional play. So I have a whole video about playing by intent, which I think you should go watch. But in my opinion, one of the requirements that you have to play to make an intentional play, which is basically a play in the game where instead of ensuring that you have millimeter level precision, you describe to your opponent what you're going to do and you showcase to them that it is possible, and then you and your opponent both agree that that's the game state now, right? I think it is reasonable in cases like this that the burden of proof is heavier for wall screening than it is in other situations. So, for example, if I went to a ruin wall and I said I want a wall screen for a 32 millimeter base, and I grabbed a 32 millimeter base and I positioned all my miniatures so that a 32 millimeter base couldn't fit next to me, and I showed my opponent that, I think that that's fine, right? Whereas right now, a lot of times what people are doing is they push all their models into the building. There they are. They just jam them all in there, and then they say, "I'm going to wall screen." And you look and like that guy's a half inch away from the wall, and that guy's 2 inches away from the wall, and this other guy's 3/4 of an inch away from the wall, and you're like, close enough, man, I guess. But like in reality, I could almost certainly get a guy in there or fight you through the other side, and then that creates weird situations, especially once the game gets down to it, and now those inches matter quite a bit. Where you're like, suddenly my model being against the wall versus being spaced for a 32 millimeter base or whatever means I get like an extra 1.5 inches of movement out. And so like now I can reach an objective, I can do an action where I couldn't normally previously. So I think in this one instance, it would be reasonable for example, a TO to say, hey, if you want to wall screen, you have to do it, right? I don't think, in my opinion, that Games Workshop needs to come in and make a sweeping ruling where they say that all terrain works this way somehow, even though it might physically not work that way. But I don't think it's unreasonable for us as a community to say the onus is on the defender to showcase that they can wall screen effectively. Which I think is, I don't know. I think that is what I think about it. Why is it 32 millimeter and not 1.26 inches? That's an industry standard. Just the industry started in Europe and started in Britain. Like tabletop wargaming was like very much a British sort of invention, and they just are a European invention, I guess, and they just used their millimeter to size bases. That's just, and it's always worked that way. Like as far as I know, since the beginning of the industry, they just used millimeters. I think part of it's that like they source a lot of them from China, and it's probably easier to use the standard metric measurements when you're doing overseas purchasing. I imagine that's the case. The interaction is also just representation of taking a defensive position. Yeah, so the last thing we could talk about here is that there is a whole discussion about everyone's opinion, which I think is going to be interesting to go through, for sure. If a model is on a 40 mil base, can it reach 40 millimeters into the building? Or it can reach 40 millimeters into the building if the opponent is defending the building. So yeah, like you can double your base size to engage people. So the problem is that it gets like pretty weird because and some people have brought this up, and we might end up getting to some comments to talk about it. Some people have brought this up where once you start being able to extend your threat range to engage through buildings, it actually makes buildings worse for people, which is not really, I think, the gameplay that you want to be promoting, where it's like defending a structure, like taking a position of defending a structure actually makes you easier to kill. You're like, why does that happen? I mean, it's like, to some extent, Warhammer 40k works like that a lot of times, where for some reason, being in proximity to your opponent makes them infinitely faster. Why does that happen? Why is my movement literally quintuple when somebody enters an 18-inch distance of me, whereas I can only move 6 inches Normally, that doesn't make any sense, and it's like it would be sort of a similar situation. So we are trying to argue 40k mechanics from the perspective of realism, which makes no fucking sense because 40k doesn't make sense as a game, right? It tries to be like simulative, or it has in the past, and it has never made any sense. It's very silly. But I think that the game is benefited from structures offering a defensible position where your models can take terrain and stage and do stuff without necessarily being in like crazy danger. And if you allow things like, say, my monster gets a 3-inch engagement range when it's fighting a building because its base is really big, or even just 2-inch engagement range, suddenly that building becomes almost impossible to occupy at all, especially from a position where you're not in the line of sight. And I can extend the threat range of that monster when I take the building, which kind of is like, well, I don't know if I don't want to. And so now you just like play less interaction. You play like more defensive and more cagey, and you're like, I don't know. That always gets weird to me, in my opinion. But I don't super duper love. I think I'm biased a little bit when recognize my own biases. That I'm biased a little bit against 40k's combat rules. I think they're very bad, but it is what it is. What are people's opinions? This is only 22 days ago from within the last month. What are people's opinions of the strategy of standing 1.1 inches away from a ruined wall? I'm new to Warhammer. I think the role isn't fun because it results in less action. I would like to hear the perspective of others. Yeah, so sometimes it results in less action, but sometimes it also results in more aggressive play, right? Because you can, if you know you can stage without just being bogged down in idiots, then you are incentivized to put models more farther forward. And so it also makes the game, I think, less of a piece trade, which I think is sometimes interesting too. If you can always charge people, right, then instead of positioning around the train on the table, you are just like beating each other's action figures into each other, which is, of course, by definition, more action. But is it interesting? I don't know. To some extent, I think that we would as a community, however it ends up working, right? At the end of the day, we change an edition when we update the rules and whatever, and this interaction exists or is codified or is removed from the game. Either way, as a community, we would get over it. I think that there are pros and cons to it in either way. It's fine as long as you state your intent and you're both playing with the same understanding. If neither of you have discussed it and one of you is playing vanilla and the other player is playing WTC, it'll mess things up. That does sound like a nightmare. I like the idea too that like you both rocked up and it's like just a weird terrain set that you've like never seen before. And like some, like you and your opponent both like set up terrain from like the LGS, right? Just like random terrain, like buildings and stuff around the table. And then you're like, oh, we're not playing WTCT rules? You're like, wait a minute, what? Excuse me? But I've already put 3 Hammerfall bunkers in my list, so I can deep strike them in the Orbital Strike Force. Why would I assume we're playing WTC? I always think that's very funny. Especially because WTC is like, it is sometimes funny to hear like vanilla, chapter approved 2025 rules and WTC rules like held up to the same standard, because one of them is just the game. And then the other one is like a bunch of house rules that somebody made because they don't like monsters. I think it's something I'd be glad if it went away in 11th edition, but as it stands, it's just one of those things to learn and be aware of. That or it got codified into an actual rule in 11th edition, like barricading is an action or something. Coco Bean over here talking about it I think that's really cool. I've talked about before that I think I would like buildings to be occupiable in future editions. I think that'd be sweet. So it's less about necessarily like placing all your models in specifically where they should be, and it's more about using the structure as like a game element rather than just as like an area of terrain where like it sort of works right now. After playing a lot, getting into competitive, making it an official rule is my favorite solution. Once you're used to it, it makes the game feel more tactical and the ruins more valuable. I'm personally a fan of making terrain mattering. Yeah, I think that would be an interesting thing to do. Like, but as I mentioned before, you would need like a whole, in order to implement that as a mechanic, you would need like a whole redux of how ruins work, like from a fundamental level, because you can't really just say, well, there's an action now that makes you uninteractable, because how do you rule that interaction otherwise, right? Games Workshop has tried to rule around this in the past, and they've really royally fucked things up. I don't know if anybody remembers like the 2 months of absolute fucking nightmare we had in 9th edition when they built a rule specifically to prevent wall screening. The rule was that if you engaged an enemy and your engagement range passed over a ruin, you could extend it to 2 inches, which allowed you to, in many cases, bounce your model in or out of engagement range based on your piling consolidate moves, which was a fucking nightmare. It like just straight up broke the game fundamentally. And you would need to like recontextualize all of that. You're like, if we need barricading to be an action, how does someone get engaged in a building? And you have to have it be like where they can charge the building and attack models inside. It's a whole thing. Now we're basically talking about occupying a building. I don't know. So it's stuff. It's an interesting detail. It says graphic CSP. Where codifying 1 inch of the wall seems like more complexity at a glance, but in reality, it clarifies a fairly common interaction between players, which simplifies the gameplay. Another issue is the eligible target status. Oh my god, we get to circle back around to Infernal Puppeteer stuff in this discussion about melee mechanics in the game. Love it. We see it pop up constantly, but Games Workshop has not actually spelled out what it means. Which sounds, that is actually true. That's so true. Oh my god, we talked about this when we talked about Infernal Puppeteer. So you're required to have an eligible target in order to be selected to shoot, but eligible target is not a defined term, which is fucking disgusting. So there's a big open question about whether or not you can actually like activate your Infernal Puppeteer without things to shoot at, because activating Infernal Puppeteer would make them eligible for you to target. Does that mean they're eligible targets before you use Infernal Puppeteer? No one knows, because they've literally never templated any of these rules. A fucking mess. I love that we brought this up. This is totally non sequitur, but that's so fun. Incredible. This is like almost me crashing out about the Space Marine keyword stuff, by the way. This whole eligible target thing gave me such a headache that I wanted to pull my hair out. But we had a couple discussions about it, and I'm over it. Most places have ruled that you are eligible to target when you use, even before you use Infernal Puppeteer, and that's fine. However the event wants to rule it is totally fine with me. Make it more official and like role-playing. Maybe add a stratagem like Breach Door, which allows you to charge or allows to charge a specific role. The problem with this, I feel, is like, if we tie it to actions, it gets really weird. If we're like, specifically, we're talking about like setting a barricade or something, which was, they tried in 9th edition for a second, because you could defend a building if your unit was wholly within it, and which gave you +1 to hit in melee when you got attacked. But it wasn't really like, it was like this extra piece of rules context that didn't matter. And if you make it an action, it's one of those things, it's like really difficult to balance in a way that makes sense. Because if you make it like an action, then it's like very difficult to do. But if you make it something that just happens reactively, then it's something that always happens. I don't know. I'm sure that there are going to be situations where there's ways to make it work. For sure. I think that generally speaking, Games Workshop has very slowly moved towards a lot of effects like these simply being free and things that are applied. Rather than using a restrictive resource like your actions during a phase or your command points. And I think I like that. It makes the game more fluid when you remove the cost from things and simply only make them requirements. Should we take the opportunity to peruse the WTC rule? I don't know. I mean, I guess we should. I guess it does make sense. Coco Bean says, plays it to a similar wish I have for 11th in Indestructible Terrain, where terrain pieces have wounds and a defensive profile similar to a land speeder for small terrain, rhino for medium, land raider for large. You can destroy them, they collapse or removed at the end of the turn. That way, if somebody's barricading themselves, your bloodthirster can just smash the building. Are Coco Bean and I have never been pictured in the same photo. Are we the same person? Is this my alt account? I don't even know, because I think we're basically all talking about the same things. I like it. Bring back 3rd edition initiative. Please don't do that. I don't know if anybody really understands how little you actually want 3rd edition initiative. As someone who used to play Tyranids versus Necrons, it was disgusting. If you played literally anything with high initiative values, you basically got fight first on all of your units for free all the time. It was super bad. It was not good for the game. It was not good for the game. You would be charged by Necron warriors and kill them on their own turn. And you'd be like, why did you charge me? The correct answer was simply not to engage with me because I'm invincible in melee. Not a good rule. It was bad. It was very bad. Bring back 3rd edition vehicle facings. There was I almost brought up a thread that we could look at where somebody's talking about bringing back vehicle facings. I'm of two minds about vehicle facings because I do think that they would make the game more cinematic and interesting, right? A little bit more tactical when we're talking about where you are positioning your vehicles and how you're positioning your vehicles. Because right now you just spin them around however you want, and it would be much nicer for at least the aesthetic of the game to have the vehicles facing matter. But on the other hand, it's a fucking endless rabbit hole of rules questions. How do you determine the facing of a wave serpent? I don't know. Figure it out, I guess. What the fuck? That's stupid. If they did what everyone wants them to do and put bases on everything and then just have everything base measure, you could use the bases to demarcate the facings. That would be cool. I would be so fucking into that. Star Wars Legion does that and it rules. Their vehicle rules are some of the best. All right. Should we look at the WTC solution to this whole situation? Yes. It has its own PDF. Oh, I said it was 17 pages earlier, chat. It is only 12. I did do WTC a little dirty. It is only 12 pages to determine how a ruin should be engaged, which is sort of like is emblematic of the fact that if you were to try to construct rules around this, you would need, like, the amount of effort it takes is crazy, right? Without fundamentally changing how charging works in the game. I remember the arguments for 7th edition on facings. Never again. Yeah, it was not great. Facings and scatter dice. You didn't roll the scatter dice close enough to the guy. You got to re-roll it because we can't determine the orientation and then determines how many guys I hit. Man, as like thematic as they are, oh boy, do I not miss that stuff. All right, let's hop in. So, to be clear. Oh no, my crap doesn't work. Let me fix that real quick. Chat, sorry. I will simply get rid of it. And then hopefully that will look better. Okay, here we go. Nice. Much better. Actually, it's not. It looks terrible, but we're here. Okay. So the problem, players are able to create situations where it's not possible to charge units since there's no room between the Wall of Ruin and their bases for an opponent's models to be placed, which creates a situation where the unit isn't possible to interact with. Not 100% true, but generally the case. Especially because WC does use multi-level ruins. And so I think you could just charge the next level. Like every time. Or charge around, because the walls don't tend to be that big. But I understand the problem. The solution. In a very small subset of circumstances, we treat walls as barricades for a charging unit that is either infantry, beast, Primarch, or Belisarius Call, as well as the unit that they charged. But not only while it is fighting the charging unit. This will give a 2-inch engagement range for models in combat. This prevents situations where a model would exist inside a wall for any length of time. That was the rule previously, by the way, which is absolutely insane. You would basically declare any of your models that you wished to engage the unit that was wall screening, and then those models would like become incorporeal. They would turn into a ghost, and then you would charge, and they would go inside the wall. And then for a while, it had a whole set of rules about exactly where they could go and what happens if they like couldn't complete their charge movement at the end of the fight phase. Usually, it would mean, for a hot minute, they would just phase into the wall, and then they would exist there for the rest of time. Then I think they changed it so that if you engaged and then after the fight was completed, you didn't have a place to pile in or consolidate to, then you would just bounce outside the wall. And then for a while, they just said, I don't know, call a judge and they'll move their models for you, which seems very like a excessive strain on the judge team, unfortunately. But this is the new rule, which I think is much better than all the old rules. Thank goodness. Which is actually, you can sort of like parse actually what's going on, which is amazing. All right. Cool. Okay, so here's the rule. It's a huge brick of text. After rolling a distance for a charge, if there is a wall or floor of a building that would impede the placing of models in a charging infantry beast, Imperial Primarch, or Belisarius call keyword unit from being positioned in a legal position in base contact or within 1 inch with at least one model in the unit that you wish to charge. So if a wall prevents you from making the full charge movement to engage your target, this rule takes effect. If there is a legal position for you to place your models without using this rule, you must do so. The counterplay to this rule, which often happens in WTC games, is that you construct a little space where one model from the charging unit can successfully make their charge. Then no one gets to use this rule, and so you get fought by one unit, and then you get to fight them back. That's always the that's the counterplay, which is honestly, I don't know, it's pretty smart. It's just it's very smart players utilizing mechanics against each other in like a cold like an arms race almost. All right. So so if you have to use the rule, you get place a token to next to each model in the unit that you wish to extend engagement range for. For each model with a token, it has to obey all rules that govern the charge phase, with the addition of the rule for fuel pipes and barricades, which state that when making a charge move, as well as fulfilling all the charge move criteria, you end the move as close as possible to a fuel pipe or barricade terrain feature. You contact the terrain feature and you get a 2-inch engagement range through the terrain feature to target the enemy on the other side. So it means that you can basically double the size of your engagement, but only while you're using that extra engagement range to fight through the wall. What this doesn't let you do, and there's a bunch of questions about this, is it doesn't let you stack your engagement ranges. So you can't, for example, touch the wall with your front rank and then touch the wall with the second rank of models and fight with those models as well. Those models don't get to extend their engagement range. So defending the ruin in this case still gives you a defensive benefit, which is that a bunch of your opponent's models cannot charge you, or cannot fight you, I should say. However, it does mean that they are able to be engaged. So if you have like a elite combat unit, right? Marnius Calgar is trying to charge in and fight 5 Space Marine scouts. He's almost certainly going to kill the unit anyway. So he's going to be able to go in. You can extend engagement range with him, and if the rest of the unit do whatever, then you still make the charge, you kill the target, and then you can consolidate through the wall or whatever to engage new models. However, if you're trying to get 20 boys to engage and you're fighting a wall screened unit, like only 5 boys or whatever are going to actually get to fight, because those are the models that can fight while touching the wall. And the rest of your unit's just going to like vibe. Sometimes like it lets you get the charge move and then pile in around the wall, but it's very rare. During the fight phase in the pile-in step, if the model with a token could make a pile-in move that would end in a legal position within 1 inch or base contact with the opposing model, you can either pile in or remove the token. If the token is removed, it can no longer use this rule. So if you do make the charge and use the rule to get within 2, and you make a big enough charge that you can get your models to contact, then you have to go to contact with following all the normal rules. But you give up your ability to use the barricade rules to engage anyway. So that's like the very top level overview of the rule, which is basically that if you have infantry models and stuff, those infantry models can engage at 2 inches against somebody who's wall screening you if you choose to do so, basically like when you make your charge move, essentially. And then that will impose some requirements on you, which is that you have to either pile into melee or use 2-inch engagement to fight through the wall. You can't choose to do both, essentially. But it also doesn't mean that you can extend engagement range for a bunch of models in the unit all at once, effectively. So you still get a little bit of a defensive benefit from hiding behind the wall, but you're not entirely immune to melee. I think it's honestly, especially given like the old versions of this rule that were kind of like mechanically very difficult. I think this is the best version of this house rule that exists. I will mention, however, that if you are not playing explicitly WTC events, then this rule is not in use. This is a special custom rule that was made basically explicitly to play with the WTC terrain format too. So if you're not playing WTC terrain as well, it is not the intention that you play with this rule. In WTC, the counterplay is also often just putting stuff like Nurglings in front of the wall. They cannot attack using the 2-inch engagement range if there is a unit that they could attack within 1 inch. Well, then they still get to kill your Nurglings, though, right? Then you're still like interacting. I guess that protects the unit inside the wall if they're more valuable. But the idea, and I think the expressed purpose too, which I think is very fair, is to eliminate or reduce situations, the instance of situations where a unit can be entirely immune to your opponent. Which can happen in some cases. And if we look at, like, honestly, Games Workshop's not really like beating the allegations here, because if we look at some of the chapter approved layouts, like, oh my God, do they create some situations where you can be just fucking immune? Layout 8 is like the worst one for me. Layout 8 like gets me every time. Is it gonna let me go to Warhammer Community? There it is. Thank you. If we like take a peek at some of the CA layouts. Nope. Come on, computer. Let me see the terrain. Yeah, so like if we look at layout 8, this is the one that always kills me. Is this ruin right here? This little guy? So it's the ones like towards the center on the top and bottom of the map, right? They're adjacent to the table edge, so most unit types can't go around. Layout 7 has these as well, but they're offset from the edge of the table. So a lot of stuff like 100 mil bases and stuff, I even think larger things, a lot of big stuff can go through because it's a 5-inch area here. However, in these layouts, when they're adjacent to the edge, it's less than 2. And so like you can fit like explicitly only like 40 mil bases through essentially. We even had a weird situation at Everwinter where a Squig Hog Boy unit tried to go through, but the judges determined that the knob in the Squig Hog Boys unit is like 2 millimeters too wide to go through the gap. So only the regular boys could go through, but the Squig Hog knobs couldn't, that were inside the unit. And it was just like, well, this is awkward. Like half my unit just gets fucking traffic jammed in this little gap because they can't go through. Kind of disgusting. And then also what you could do is wall screen out this section. And if your opponent doesn't have stuff that can go through here, and sometimes you can move block here with a different unit, then they have to go all the way around through the middle to engage, to fight a unit that's occupying this. And if there's an objective on that, it's like uninteractable. Those are the situations where, as much as I actually love layout 8, I think layout 8 is super fun. I have a good time playing on this layout almost every time I play it. But these ruins being totally uninteractable, I can see being frustrating. And I do understand constructing a rule like this to make that situation interactable. It is interesting to me that WTC does go out of their way to write a 12-page document describing exactly how this works, while they actually don't have this in their packet, right? They've constructed their terrain to be much more interactable than GW terrain, because basically all their ruins look like this one, where you can just go around the side, or you can go over the top because they have second levels. So, and speaking to a lot of WTC, I don't play WTC typically. But speaking to a lot of WCC players, they say they actually very rarely use it, which does make me off a little bit. But I could understand people wanting to be able to engage in situations like this for sure. Here's another solution to introduce melee ranges, so a spear can reach through. Differential engagement ranges also makes this solved and made more interesting. Engagement range is a weird concept. I don't disagree with that. Yeah, for sure. The 1 inch it's good for flexibility, because like back in the day it was like specifically only base contact, and on 1 inch I think it helps the gameplay a little bit more fluidly. The problem is like where we currently have the 10th edition rules have the engagement range, but then require basing in a lot of instances. The engagement range feels sort of superfluous. So I don't know. It is what it is. Can confirm it's extremely rarely used in WTC, but it is nice to have, especially in melee mirrors. That's good. The part that does make me sad about it is that it doesn't have any. The WTC rule explicitly does it explicitly only works for units that could otherwise go through the wall. So the real issue, and I'm biased here. I like playing big stupid monsters and shit, and it becomes a little problematic when you have situations like these, and you have models that you have armies, like entire armies that physically can't interact beyond this point, right? And WTC already has problems with those kind of unit types, but they create a house rule to make ruins more easier to engage in, but they don't offer any assistance to those specific types of units, despite the fact that they're already underplayed in the format because they're so disadvantaged in the terrain system. Whereas the Games Workshop terrain, honestly, tends to be pretty okay for monsters because you do have a lot of these big open gaps where you can put big vehicles and stuff through, which I do appreciate. I think if you play the less open terrain, like some of these layouts are just a fucking shooting gallery where you should just shoot through the middle or whatever. As long as you don't play those terrain formats in a singles event, I do think the chapter approved layouts are able to support a pretty varied ecosystem of different types of armies, which I do appreciate. They do a good job generally, outside of like this one and this one. Those are the worst ones, I think. And then maybe 6 is meh. 6 is mid. This rush distance is really annoying between these ruins because this is tough to hide. There's like lines around this corner, so a lot of times you can't get through here, and these really don't do that much outside of like block a couple of the lines here. Basically, I wish I had my telestrator. I could draw these better. I don't like this is not my favorite. But I do think like if you play like a lot of the more constrained ones, so like 1 is good. I think 2 is okay. Especially if you play it on Search and Destroy. I just played a bunch of games in Search and Destroy on layout 2, and having this corner open to be able to like maneuver around is actually really sick. And if you play like 7 and 8, I think they're cool. Those are my favorite. So I don't know, 50%. 50% are okay. Talked to half a dozen WTC team members, including multiple captains. Most of them didn't even know about the token rule. Yeah. I mean, the token rule doesn't really matter, right? Like physically playing a token down is very performative. Just be like, these 5 guys are going to 2-inch engage, which is, the equivalent of a token. I understand the need to introduce a token for the technicality of the rule, but I definitely understand why people wouldn't necessarily actually use a token to be like, I will put a little bead next to these models. Now they would use the new rule. Whereas you could be like, this power fist guy and these 3 chainsword guys are going to do it. And your opponent's like, cool, man. Hate layout too many shooting lanes. There is in some deployments there are. If you use it for explicitly search and destroy, I think it's really interesting because the side ruins get really cool. This is like super. We're just like so off of the beaten path here. Like the dynamic around these ruins, it becomes really interesting in my opinion. This ruin is like worthless though. I kind of wish this ruin was something else. It's like it generally doesn't do anything. It's this ruin just might as well not be there for the most part. I almost wonder if like that's one you could do multiple layouts on, like multiple layouts with this composition, and you just like change the orientation of this so that like matches the deployment line, so it's actually usable for line of sight blocking. Because like 90% of the time, it's basically just worthless. You can protect like 5 dudes in this little corner from turn 1 shooting, like reasonable turn 1 shooting, and then like you can stage them inside the building, which is nice. But generally, it's not really gonna like wildly change your game plan. What it does do is it breaks up engagements from the 2 big ruins in the sides, which is cool. But what you really want it to do is protect you on turn 1, which it super doesn't, which is like annoying. We should do a layout tier list. That'd be fun. Maybe we'll do that. Not next week. I have other topics for next week, but maybe we'll do a video or something. I think that would be fun to do as a live stream though. Maybe a special live stream. I think that'd be cool. The terrain layout tier list. where we talk about all of the deployments. I think I want to do a video as well because I've been playing so many games with Land Raiders, and now everyone's gone fucking Land Raiders and shit. I think I'm going to do a video where I talk about playing Land Raiders on the different deployment types and playing like big monsters and vehicles and stuff. Because I see that's probably the biggest mistake I see new players have is that they'll be like, I will deploy my model out here. And you're like, well, now there's just like 7 lines of sight to see that guy and he's just going to die. So you should deploy him here instead. And then you have to pattern all of the different movements to get through depending on the deployment and the mission layout. I think it's an interesting topic. It's something you think about quite a bit if you are playing them competitively very often. You play a bunch of different matchups, but if you are newer to the game and you're just like rocking up to an RTT, it can really bone you because you take big monsters and stuff and you put them in the wrong spot and then you just lose the game immediately. That sucks. So that might be something we talk about. Can we do a tier list of weird and wonky 40k rules? Yeah. The problem, I think we should do a list of all the weird rules. I think it would be cool to do, as we do like retrospective stuff, to do like the weirdest rules from like previous editions, where we go like through like 8th edition had a bunch of weird shit. Let's get an 8th edition. What about like when you Perils of the Warp and you die, you explode? That was a weird one. That was in fairness, all the way through 9th edition too. But like 8th and 9th edition, we could talk about all the bizarre bullshit. Defending buildings in 9th edition was a good one because it was like generally didn't do anything. Also, heavy cover, that was a thing that happened for a while, and then everyone took it off their train because it was actually a nightmare. Where's some other good examples? Like heroic intervention being an automatic thing that characters do. 8th edition, heroically intervening while you were engaged was the funniest thing ever. You would see, because Space Marines got bonuses when they heroically intervened, you would always declare your heroic intervention, even if it didn't do anything. It would just give you your bonuses when you declared it. So it was like a free declaration. Didn't cost you anything. It just happened if you were within 3 inches of a character, even if you were engaging the character. And so I remember very explicitly, we streamed a game in 8th edition on T5S2 when Ragnar Blackmane came out, the new Ragnar Blackmane from the box set with him and Gazgul. And every single Space Marine list immediately had Ragnar Blackmane in him because he was really good. And so you would have these mirror matches where it was 2 Ragnar Blackmanes like standing next to each other, just declaring heroic interventions to each other. And like, this is the stupidest interaction of all time. They were like, you're engaging me because we had an ongoing combat from last round? Yeah. Well, I'm going to heroically intervene you. Oh, yeah? Well, I'm going to heroically intervene you. So dumb. Incredibly stupid. Also, the endless cavalcade of lookouts or updates. That was pretty wild, too. Flyer blocking. Oh my god, that was terrible. AdMech literally making it so you can't leave your deployment zone, putting 12 unengageable flyer bases. Yeah, that one was fucking wild. Especially because in 8th edition, in 9th edition, they made it so that you could move through the flyers, right? As long as you didn't end engaging them. 8th edition, they were just models. So even though you couldn't engage them, you also couldn't move into their engagement range. So they would simply just block you. I had a whole playlist of videos where, for the longest time, people wouldn't believe me that AdMech were the most broken army for like 5 straight years. And I had a bunch of videos where like Eldar players who are really strong and super fast would just physically be movement blocked to the point where they killed a bunch of airplanes, but at the end of the game they just lost because they couldn't score any points. Fucking horrible. Absolutely degenerate bullshit. And people were like, "What do you mean AdMech's been broken for so long?" And I was like, nobody plays them. You don't understand. I actually have a video. It's on my hard drive. It's recorded, where it talks a lot about that, about late 8th edition retrospective, and I scripted it and recorded the whole thing, and then I went to travel for the holidays, and I never edited it, but it'll happen at some point. Was watching a game on stream. Why do models in a squad get taken off even if they can't be seen? Thought you were shooting the model you can see. No, you're shooting the unit you can see, but the casualty assignment happens from the defending player. So as soon as you activate a unit, you shoot an enemy unit. Any casualties you inflict are always going to be inflicted, regardless of whether or not line of sight changes during your shooting activation. Once your unit's done shooting and all the casualties get pulled, the defending player can pull the unit so that the models in line of sight can't be seen anymore. But
your whole activation gets to be completed before you end there. And that's, I think, to some extent, it doesn't really make sense, but it's like the lesser of two evils, because the alternative is that you can only ever assign damage to things that the attacking unit can see, which requires a bunch of rules to begin with. But then also, it makes it so that large multi-model units are like unstoppable, because you can put an infinite number of attacks into them and only ever kill one model, right? Which is like, they basically get to constantly just play on objectives, and they always just like string out 5 guys, and then you shoot a Redeemer at them and they lose 5 guys instead of 20. So I think it makes the game like function to some extent, but it also, there is still relevance to having a unit that's big enough that multiple activations are required to kill it, because you have a lot of control over whether or not your opponent can get that second activation. The key right now, if you want to activate multiple models into a single enemy, is to try to gain line of sight to any attached characters, because the character can never be removed for casualties, unless you have precision, but that's up to you, and you can just choose not to use precision. So that's the good one. That would make Necron Warriors unbeatable. Yeah. Yeah, that would be absolutely horrifically disgusting. I would not like that. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I saw a lot of people complain about it. I saw like at one point I watched somebody just absolutely crash out because like they had like this big like screening unit that's like all sprung out. It was like a very casual game. And they had this unit of like 30 dudes all strung out in 9th edition. And it got shot, and like 5 dudes from the other side that were like 40 inches away got removed. And the guy was like, "What the fuck? Why does that make sense? That's stupid." I was like, "Is what it is, man. I don't know. The alternative is worse." So here we are. All right, chat. Would rely on shooting units out of coherency. Yeah, that's a good example too. I think we're gonna wrap up there. Thanks for hanging out with me, everybody. I think this is a fun topic to talk about. 1.1 inch wall screening, definitely one of the rules of all time. I think I don't know. It exists because the core mechanics have to. Fixing it currently would be difficult, but I'm sure that we can find. Other games don't have this problem, really, chance, so we can find solutions around it. It just requires Games Workshop to make real terrain rolls, which I know they won't, but it's been 3 editions since we had actual terrain on the table. I will be live on Twitch in, checks notes, 2 hours. So please come hang out with me over there. I am playing Salamanders into Tau, I think is the matchup today, which should be interesting. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get Alpha Struck off the table, but trying to engage with the army that shoots from far away, but I'm very close. That's not ideal, but it is what it is. Sometimes you just hit that. So I will see you all in a couple hours over on Twitch. Links in the chat. And yeah, let's go hang out with that. So I'll see you over there, everyone. Thanks for watching. Keep it classy, folks. Have happy wargaming, all that stuff. And I'll see you in the next one.